No, good evening. What is good afternoon? Good afternoon now. I'm going to apologize. Can you put Dotted on there? I'm going to say sorry because we're running a little bit behind because of me. I fixed my car, and when I got back in my car, my clock was on a different time. And so I was driving around thinking I had lots of time. I went and got gas and, you know, and a coffee, and then came on my way over here and realized I was almost an hour behind. So my apologies to everybody for getting going late. And I definitely would like to welcome you to our second Pitch Me on the Patio with Nasim. And today we have a guest, Catherine Warren from Innovate Edmonton. And I'm going to start with, I think, something that's very important, which is a land acknowledgement. You know, MacEwan is known for some great Indigenous inclusion and highest percentage of Indigenous students. And the Roundhouse is built right on some Indigenous land as well. And so I'm going to read a little land acknowledgement, just taking a moment to remember why we are here. It says, we acknowledge that this land on which we gather in Treaty 6 territory is the national gathering place for many Indigenous people. We honor and respect the history, languages, ceremonies, and culture of the First Nations, Métis, and Inuit who call this territory home. The First Peoples' connection to the land and teaches us about the inherent responsibility to protect and respect Mother Earth. With this acknowledgement, we honor the ancestors and children who have been buried here, missing and murdered, Indigenous women and men in the process of ongoing collective healing for all human beings. We are reminded that this is, we are all treaty people, and this is our responsibility to have to one another. Thank you. Thanks for being here. So the first things first, we're going to ask some questions. I'm going to get quick introductions, and then we are going to have Catherine do a little presentation, a little short talk, and then we're going to open it up for questions. I have some, and we'll get some from the audience. The other thing I'd like to notice is we are having beer on the patio, but I'd like to point out that these are non-alcoholic beers. I think this is really important for everybody to know. We're not just sitting here drinking while you guys are sitting in your offices. So that'll come later. In the meantime, actually, let's start with Nasim. So Nasim is our Allard chair, which we're very excited about. But why don't you do a quick introduction again?
Yeah, for sure. And so Nasim Bashir, I'm the CEO of Williams Engineering Canada. We have a number of companies, 2 engineering companies and a technology company, all working in essentially the building infrastructure space. And I do a bunch of corporate governance work. I chair Innovate Edmonton. And I also chair the Prairie Sky Gondola Company. So if you want to talk about gondolas later on, we can do that too as well. And so I've got a huge interest in entrepreneurial things, companies in general, how they work and how to make them work better. And I'm a lot of my time trying to make sure that what it is that we're doing as a group of companies is driving to our purpose as a company, which is to brighten the lives of people in our community. So that's a big part of what I do.
Excellent. Thank you. And I'll do a very short one, and then we'll turn the mic over to Catherine. I am Colin. It's great to have you. I happen to have the privilege of being a part of EIR, a part of MacEwan as the EIR, Entrepreneur in Residence, which is a pretty new role, both for MacEwan and for me in this case. So we're excited. I run a number of different companies and run an accelerator and continue to just love doing great things for entrepreneurs in Alberta and Edmonton and around the world, as it turns out. And I'm really excited to have Nasim and Catherine here to talk about entrepreneurship and business and people and all kinds of stuff. So I'll turn it over to Catherine.
Nice. Thank you so much. Very nice to see all of you today. I come from a family of entrepreneurs, and perhaps it's no surprise that I've become an entrepreneur who helps other entrepreneurs succeed. And when Nasim and Colin invited me to speak with all of you today, it was really about team building, something that we're very active in progress with at Innovate Edmonton. And the team that we're building is not just for ourselves and our own agency, but think of it as your team. We're really an extension of the good work that goes on in local entrepreneurial community and a resource for all of you. So at Innovate Edmonton, our role is to advance and promote Edmonton as a global innovation capital. We believe in big tent innovation. What does that mean? Really, it means that innovation exists within all of us. We want to celebrate that. We want to capitalize on that, whether we work in technology, in sustainability, in arts and culture, and many other sectors. Edmonton has a lot to offer and a lot to offer the world. We also believe that innovation happens not just in startups or not just at the entrepreneurial thin end with the wedge, but all along the spectrum, from very early stage founder-led ventures to extremely mature resource economy companies that need to pivot, for example. And we also appreciate that Edmonton's innovation community includes a very diverse population. We have female founders and funders, we have Indigenous innovators, we have Black-owned businesses, and entrepreneurs from the LGBTQ2+ community. So we have so much to capitalize on as a city, and it's really a privilege to be a new Edmontonian and to work with all of you. Ultimately, we're here to make a difference, supporting innovations with impact. No surprise that we have a purpose-led chair, someone who really believes in innovations with impact and a legacy for our community. So we're focused specifically on innovations that tackle global challenges and megatrends. For example, the climate emergency and sustainability, public health and pandemic response, food security and ag tech, digital equality, inclusion and education, and many other avenues for innovation where Edmonton really excels. But the point being that we have a lot to offer the world at a critical time, and it's our role as your innovation authority to bring that out and to celebrate that. And in terms of the specific resources that you might want to tap us for, it could be anything from co-working space to HR advice and guidance, and event planning and other things that might help catalyze your businesses. So my own background and learning from HR and team building come from a career in media technology, in community building, and in international business development. Early in my career, a couple of co-founders and I launched a software technology company that we eventually grew and took public on the NASDAQ to a $300 million market cap. We focused on broadcast software, so it had really a combination of art and science and technology. It was very pioneering. There was a lot of research and development, and along the way, this meant hiring a very diverse team, building out 2 studios in 2 different cities. And what I learned from that along the way, because our intellectual property and our company were totally unproven, was the importance of really communicating that strategic vision and value proposition to lure people into our way of thinking. And then sharing that vision to recruit and retain employees. I found a lot of commonalities between what we pitch to investors and what we pitch to employees. So everyone was looking for that wild ambition, something to really hook onto. And then, of course, they were looking for leadership that they could believe in. And so, we tried our best to bring all of that to the forefront for 2 very different audiences. And then, of course, we also created incentives like an employee stock option plan and an inspiring work environment. So ultimately, I became very interested in the people power side of my work, specifically interactive audiences. And I left that business to launch another startup called Fan Trust, focusing on entertainment business development and community building for video games, esports, television, and film. And what I learned over the next 20 years and the rise of social media was really how do you extend a team to include customers, customers as evangelists, customers as co-creators, customers as investors. And the line between employee and customer, or between shareholders and customer, was increasingly blurry in a good way. So this taught me the importance of treating staff like our best customers and treating customers like valued team members. And then several years ago, I moved on from building virtual communities to building real world communities, and from business development to economic development. I took on the CEO role of an innovation district, Canada's Centre for Digital Media. It combines higher education, industry collaboration, and urban transformation. And there I learned again about the power of extending teams through post-secondary partnerships, and then the importance of that proximity, creating a real crucible of a neighborhood for these serendipitous innovation encounters. We had art galleries, we had game studios, we had graduate programs and student housing. It was all together in this growing neighborhood where really cool collisions could happen every day. So we used students working with us and the professionals in the community to solve problems of urban development, including urban vibrancy, urban safety, and these other goals that we needed to address. And I think we were really better for those student contributions. In particular, we had a number of foreign students. The majority of our students were international. And so they really brought a lot of insight from different innovation communities that we could bring to bear on our neighborhood. We also, I felt had to work with different levels of government and with transportation and the like. And so it was great exposure to the public sector, which is very helpful to me now in this role leading Innovate Edmonton. And then finally from there, I went on to lead the Vancouver Economic Commission, where our focus was on investment attraction. And I needed to lead and recruit a team that was very diverse, combining like these deep grassroots community organizers on the one end with these very high-flying international sales professionals on the other. So it was really a mixed bag in terms of corporate culture, but doing that well and doing that well together allowed us to attract $3 billion in high-impact investment to land in the city of Vancouver, as well as about $5 billion a year to land as investments in local companies. So, what I learned from that, keep such a wide-ranging team on track and keep them united. We had a lot of people traveling all the time and therefore working remotely, and these super high-value targets that we had to achieve. We used technology, and I think we'll talk a bit more about that later today, but we developed custom extensions to Salesforce. That was our CRM, and tied that into our business plan and actually ran the whole business through Salesforce, including performance measures and team evaluations. And we shared our results openly and transparently. Everyone could see them at all times on the dashboard, but we also presented them as a team at our quarterly meetings. So this kept everyone's eye on the prize, and the prize being our city, and then held people accountable and held them together for what matters most. So now as I work with Nasim and with our board, with the universities, including MacEwan and U of A and Northwest and others, we're using some of these lessons and more to build a great team here and to take Edmonton to the world.
Okay. Wow. Man.
And we're done.
Yeah, exactly. Mic drop. Let's go. That was really cool. I mean, I haven't had an opportunity to really dig into your background. I've heard a couple of things along the way, but that's fantastic. Like what
Thank you.
bringing stuff together for Vancouver, which I'm glad they benefited, but now you're here. This what a win for us. Absolutely.
And for me, it's very mutual and such a great time to be bringing people together and team building as we ideally emerge from the pandemic. So I'm thrilled to be in Edmonton as well.
You know what? I mean, that's a great place to start. This is like the first time, even last time we did this call 2 weeks ago, we were all on Zoom.
Okay.
And this is like a weird new world again.
We're together.
Look, I can touch people. And it's okay, I sanitized. But you know, we are in this new world now, and you experienced this through your process of moving here and getting involved in Innovate Edmonton. All these things coming together, a lot of that has been done online and in a COVID world. And as we're moving out of that, how have you found the dynamics of team building and working with a team change over the last several years, both from going into a pandemic and now starting to come out of a pandemic?
Yeah, I mean, such a great question. You know, first and foremost, I would say the pandemic has made us all more sensitive leaders and more attuned to that blurry line between home and work, and allowing people to bring their whole selves to work. In some cases, unfortunately, bringing their whole work home. And so, you know, I think it's really stretched me as a leader. When I see, you know, just for example, I had a bunch of computer equipment installed in my home office in Edmonton yesterday afternoon, and like, oh my gosh, that's big, right? And so you really see firsthand how work can intrude on private life and how important it is to be sensitive about that for our employees and not turn everybody's house just into a workplace extension. So, you know, there's definitely been that. I would also say this is a great time for hiring and for bringing people back together because they just long for that connection. And so on a recruitment side and on an employee side, and I see that James Hampshire is joining us. He's our head of people and culture at Innovate Edmonton. You know, we've tried some ingenious things to make people feel comfortable along that way. And I myself was hired, child of the pandemic, hired through Zoom by Nasim. We worked together for 6 months before we even met. And so everything was done virtually. And, you know, when you think about that, even a couple, 3 years ago, I think it would be unheard of to hire like a CEO role without ever seeing like the whites of my eyes. And so that, of course, gave me great comfort that I could do the same thing in hiring our team. And I see we also have Heather joining us, who heads government and agency relations and will become a very important connector for all of you and for MacEwan. And so, you know, just finding new ways to connect with people through the pandemic virtually, and then ultimately when they're comfortable to do that in person has been huge. And then lastly, I would say that Innovate Edmonton is in a unique role because we're expected to be innovators, which in a workplace culture does mean offering flexibility, being very attuned with individual and diverse needs, and allowing for that work-life balance. On the other hand, as a public organization, our role is very much to bring people back to work, to inspire downtown vibrancy, and to create an amazing place that will want to invite other entrepreneurs back downtown. So we're juggling a couple of big things. Yeah.
It really is, you know, it's a 2x increase in complexity because we got one foot in the old world of how we actually do work and meet people and hire new people and work with people. And the other side is completely remote. I mean, today, here, and how often would we actually be sitting in a restaurant doing this?
Yeah.
In like in the traditional world, if your kid came in front of the camera, it would be like, go away, you know, or your dog or anybody else.
Now everyone wants a big hug.
Yeah,
Exactly.
but so the acceptability, I think, so the acceptability, I think, of these different work modes and how companies are getting built is, I'm going to put you on the winning side or on the losing side, but they're more complex.
Yeah.
So we need more skill, more capabilities, maybe more technology, who knows yet, in terms of how to sort of manage all these relationships. But a big part of it is really that flexibility and how one works. But the future of work is actually here now.
Yeah.
We're living it.
And we're living
We're living the dream.
And as a CEO too, I'll throw that in there. It's also more expensive. So how you get a virtual world and a real world, and you have to maintain both.
Right.
In terms of the collaboration piece, how do you collaborate downtown Edmonton is going to be different.
That's actually a really interesting point. So if team building is okay. I believe that the team is really the central part. It's the family and how we deliver to the world. I love the fact that you talked about your customers are part of the family, but really ultimately we have to have a great family, and they connect with and do a good job with the customers, right? But are you finding that there's more, I mean, with the complexity and everything, what does the office look like? What does the spend on rent going to look like? Like, are we going to see the demise of some of these towers as people kind of move into this more hybrid space? Like, how do you feel that's going to move?
We're in the middle of changing everything, and so I'm happy to pitch in on that. But I really want to hear Catherine's sort of view of that.
Well, we're also going to be finding new space for Innovate Edmonton that accommodates the local community as well as our growing team, as well as some of the teams that we've acquired. So we recently acquired Startup Edmonton and some of the programming from Tech Edmonton. So we really do need to create a new environment to operate in, and ideally an environment that allows for that hybrid work, but that doesn't go dark, come 5 p.m. So we want to do things that encourage, families to come down and, join employees in the evenings, and events that inspire people to, continue on and after hours with colleagues and whatnot. So, we're really looking like at a 24-hour cycle, but with also being very respectful that we don't want to intrude in workers' home life. So juggling that will be a challenge for sure. And then what we're hearing, of course, is that it is kind of a buyer's market, so that it's relatively easy in our position to find great space and to work with landlords who have incentives to want to bring people back. So just fortuitously, our lease happens to be expiring during this period where I think it'll be very good for us to do well by the community.
That's awesome. It leads me, do you want to add to that?
Yeah, I was just going to say that the driver behind this really is letting your people choose how and when they want to work.
Right.
And really not actually getting to the point of looking for bums and chairs, but really starting to talk about impact and outcomes. And so how does the space play a role in that? And then how does your own sort of personal space, how do you use it as flexibility, especially through the different stages of life? So don't have a partner, do have a partner, no kids, don't have kids, 50 years old, 60 years old, 80 years old. It's all different for all those different people. And the conditions change, and what you want out of your life at that point is what's driving how the workforce feels. It's not the other way around, right? So I kind of chuckle at these large firms in the US or other places that are saying, you must be in the office. You're gonna lose people.
Yeah, and then that will be to our advantage, right? Because I would imagine that a number of you will be wanting to hire internationally. This could allow you to do that, to also expose your local team to more international events and experiences that they wouldn't always have to travel to. They could still build community that way. So I think, if we stay the progressive city that we are, as other countries clamp down, that will work in our favor.
It really comes down to, for us, especially as companies, it comes down to work from anywhere strategy,
Right.
and remote,
Right.
hybrid.
Yeah.
And so those are the key competencies. So you can really have your team could be distributed internationally as long as you can synchronize on clocks, which is hard to do.
Yeah.
But it allows people to really live their best lives.
Yeah.
And I think
I love
that to me is key to the demographics that we're working with.
Yeah.
So it's the
Yeah.
Gen Z to millennials, you know, and through their different stages of their lives, early, you know, and then those, you know, the boomers and beyond, I think in terms of how they fit that into that structure, it means that you just need to accommodate that, because that, you want a couple of gray hair, you know, guys and gals in the room that are gonna say, well, yeah, I've been there before, here's what happens. But then you need the excitement and the drive that comes from Gen Z and millennials to make the place go.
Right.
And you need kind of all that, right? And so it's 4 generations in the workforce, and some kind of hybrid economy with a work from anywhere attitude around impact.
Well, I like how you said it. I mean, the inputs and outcomes, right? Like we're starting to, I remember I was a recruiter for a number of years. And so I spent a lot of time working with companies all across Canada, right? Bigger companies, Telus and Bridge and things like that. But I remember some of the leaders starting to complain a lot early turn of the century, you know, 2000s, and talk about those darn millennials, right? You know, they want all this stuff and they don't want anything, you know, and all these things. I'm like, okay, let me ask you this. If you offered you this job and the expectations around this job, now, would you take it? And so many of them would go, well, no. Well, it's not the millennials, it's a shift in the thinking. And I think that this whole COVID thing has kind of really forced that issue. It's like, what do we really want from our people?
Yeah.
We want productivity, we want engagement, we want energy, right? We want cultural excitement and following and excited about a vision. You know, all of these things that we've been talking about for 50, some odd 60 years, but it hasn't really worked its way into the environment. Now, in true leadership form, in my mind, we're starting to see that become a necessity. The only way we can get people to do what is needed is by creating an internal intrinsic vision and drawing them forward into it, and then a work from anywhere kind of format, right?
Yeah, really, COVID's really been the accelerant
Yes.
to anything that's gone on. I mean, that, to me, that's the key word.
Yeah.
Acceleration. When the markets, you call it NASDAQ, go crazy early days for those technology companies for, you know, the Zooms of the world that have done extremely well over this last while. It's got to do with sort of combining you know, the conversation around how to approach your talent. It's around transformation of businesses, the digital first strategy. It's with all those things sort of combined, which for a guy that's coming out of legacy businesses trying to build new businesses, it is orders of magnitude more complex today than it was when you could just say, be in the office at 8. If you're not there, we'll find somebody else.
Right.
That's gone. Doesn't exist.
Yeah, I mean, in terms of what people are looking for from their leaders, it used to be very much like the expectation was you're going to get command and control leadership. People were fine with that, and now it's consensus and collaboration, which is very different, and not all leaders have that philosophy. Maybe it involves some rejigging around and retraining of leaders to work that way in a flatter org model.
Being on kind of both sides of that spectrum over the years in my own life, like just coming from my own command and control type leadership into a much more collaborative, collective, flat type leadership, I've had to make that shift. If you could talk to the leaders today and help them understand some of that mental shift, like I found it to be far more productive, far easier to manage. I mean, yes, aside from some of the complexity, but when people are driven from inside, it's a whole lot easier to steer them right all the time. So how have you found both two things? What would you say to the leaders to help them really understand that this is actually a better shift?
Yeah, it is a much better shift, and it is challenging. In particular, like a lot of what's taught in MBA programs doesn't conform to that. I think there are a lot of social determinants about leadership and considered to be, authoritative, masculine, like a lot of like cliche attributes for leader don't seem very inviting to a diverse group of people. And so it's hard for them to see themselves in that picture. So first of all, we have to reconstruct the model, like tear down the old model, reconstruct a model so that more people can see themselves as leaders. And then secondly, really, well, what's been helpful for me is researching and understanding servant leadership, like how can I lead by empowering others, and what would that mean for myself? Like, maybe I would become obsolete. So, but maybe that's good, right? So
be more efficient.
Yeah, right. So basically just, also recognizing that as a leader, you're going to have to go through a lot of learning curves yourself. You don't just like all of a sudden become a leader and it's over.
Definitely not.
So important. Thank you for saying that.
I think Google had a great experiment early days, on in terms of trying to eliminate management structure, and they realized at the end of the day that there is some kind of structure required for organizations to thrive, but in my experience, what you should be able to do is pull, a number of the leaders out of an organization at any one particular time, and it's the watch just keep on running.
Right.
And that means bringing your people up, because everybody needs to take their 3 weeks, 6 weeks of holidays, like 6 weeks of holidays. I never get them. I never get them. So I'm the boss, so I have to argue with myself. But you really need to be able to bring up those leadership capabilities in organizations and allow them to go on their own. But for me, it's a bit of a light touch in terms of once you wound the watch, like how do you just sort of care and maintenance of it? And our challenge is, and I think this is tougher with existing companies, which is why startups have such a tremendous opportunity to start fresh. Mm-hmm. But when you have legacy companies that are trying to transform and make all the right moves, there's a lot of baggage, a lot of friction.
You're not starting at zero, you're starting at -8, right?
Yeah. And so you had a lot of catching up to do because there's latency in how people think about how you do things. Their expectations are different.
Yeah.
They believe, they don't believe, all kinds of things.
Yeah, and cultural expectations are different too. So it turns out, like in Germany and Japan, for example, they have a lot more patents. They develop a lot more IP, and the reason for that is because their leaders plan in like 50 and 100-year chunks, and so that allows for a lot of trial and error, a lot of failures, and a lot of, I guess, throwing spaghetti at the wall. But as a result, they have some huge advantages when it comes to intellectual property. And I think we've got a lot to learn from that because, traditionally, I'd say the North American model has been more around short-term leadership. And as we know, most CEOs turn over like every 18 months. That doesn't leave that kind of continuity of vision that can really help with innovation.
Mm-hmm. So, in that, obviously, you mentioned it earlier in your little talk there. Innovation needs to happen at all levels, and it can't just be either the driver or the CEO saying, innovate. And at the same time, they can't be the bottleneck either. They have to be able to open it and include it. But now we're also dealing with a team. So there's this level like complexity, right? You've got accountability needs to be there, but open time. If you want to work at 2 a.m. and that's your best cycle, go for it. As long as you show up for the meeting at 8 a.m., I don't care when you work. You got a cat in the background, a t-shirt on. All these things are different. And then we have culture mixed into it. We have been more accepting of culture over the last, Trump, the one thing he did well, as far as I'm concerned, is he cracked the can open going, oh my goodness, we need to deal with this, right? But now we see it, through the BLM stuff and BIPOC and finally an inclusion of Indigenous and certainly the recognition of the things going on as of late. But all these things are swirling together. So how do you now hire and lead a team that is both geographically diverse, as well as culturally and or gender and age and all of these things. How do you start to wrap your head around how to set this up properly from the get-go?
Well, I mean, from the get-go, if we look at recruitment as, say, the get-go, I mean, I would say that James has done a wonderful job for us putting equity, diversity, and inclusion in everything that we do and making it like the first thing that you should know when you know about Innovate Edmonton. And we see that as positive, not for traditionally like undervalued groups, but for everybody to benefit from that. So I would say that if these things matter to you all, and I hope they do, make the fact that you're an equal pay organization right up top, like noted. Make the fact that you're an equal opportunity employer noted, and talk about these things explicitly in interviews and make sure that your values align with the team that you do hire. And I really feel that by putting that message out, we've benefited so much. Like the caliber and quality of people that care about these things and think about these things really gives them an edge in the job market. And so it's really a virtuous circle. You put that out there and then it comes back to you and then your whole organization benefits. And then the other thing I would say, like as a CEO, you're really leading 4 teams. So your employees, of course, as we discussed, but also your board, your shareholders, and then your customers. And so, giving proximity to those groups and using comparable material across all of those groups will help you on your ESG metrics, your environmental social governance metrics, will help you attract vision-aligned shareholders. It will, help you keep on track with your visionary strategic plan, thereby appeasing your board. So much good can come out of this one move towards diversity and inclusion.
Yeah, not only that, but that's bang on, but the performance is actually going to be there too, because you're delivering to a diverse set of stakeholders who need a diverse response from your management. So I sent you an article just recently on innovation and diversity in the VC world. And in that paper, it's not, I don't think it's made its way all the way through the process yet, but women-led organizations fundamentally outperform all male organizations, right? And same with other types of organizations. And it's not just in Apple or Williams or comparing ourselves at all, but you just perform better. And in my business, one of the key things that we're constantly trying to get better at is how can you actually engineer something that is used by multiple stakeholders if you actually haven't invited them to the table to design it?
Great point.
And so what you end up with, and it's kind of like actually the whole conversation around machine learning and AI, which is if you've got one particular group of people that are working with the AI thing, whatever you want to call it, and we call ours a pet name, but and if it's designed all by men, for example, you're going to get kind of traditional male answers rather than it being
man organized.
Crazy, yeah. You also end up with governments like so that diversity actually creates better products, it creates better outcomes. You have greater impact, you have less waste, and you have happier people, happier customers, happier shareholders. We're kind of done, right?
Yeah. This is great. So do you guys know who Dan Price is? He runs Gravity Payments out of Seattle. So he was recognized a couple of years back for basically taking his $1.5 million salary and dropping it down to about 120, 150.
Oh yeah, distributing across the country.
So now he pays everybody $7,000 as a starting wage, right? And the stories that I follow him, I love him. He's extremely liberal, if you want to call it that. But I'm so grateful for him pounding the pavement because he's talking exactly about this, the power of diversity and lots of voices at the table, making sure that you're openly discussing how you pay and how you look after your people and things like that. we've had no job shortage. We open a role, we have 300 jobs. People can't find anybody to work for them in the States a lot of the time because they're paying minimum wage and all this stuff. It's like, yeah, I'll go work for 70,000 at, you know, the minimum and then build. And he pays people accordingly as they go up the ladder, but to start there and then just the way he listens to and talks to the people. I think this is what you're kind of saying, what I'm hearing is the inclusion. Diversity, it's the 6 blind men and the elephant, right? You've got to have lots of different views on it to get the proper understanding of what you're trying to fix, right? Is engineered products or whatever, or even within the team, whatever the problem is. Yeah, I love this.
I so agree with that. And you know, with it used to be, for example, like if you were running a public company, you were really running 2 companies, because you were running the shareholder facing conversations and then you were running the business, and they were just 2 worlds that for some reason never came together. And I really love what Nasim said about like multi-purposing your content and the materials. You're sharing all of the stuff with all of the people, and you're not you know, kind of doing a church and state divide, like you get to see this, but you get to see that. And I think data rooms have gone a long way to democratizing what we share about our companies. And whether it's like an internal data room that everyone in the company can see, or something that you open the gate on for M&A or investment purposes, it's really forced us to think about utter transparency, just making everything available to everyone.
I love that. And again, I think it does a lot to keep us transparent.
Yeah.
But I have 6 businesses, and so I'm always busy. I'm always running around, and there's no way I can lie about anything. I can't remember I can barely remember anything, right? And so I think that level of transparency, and if I can tell the same thing to my investors that I tell to my employees, that I tell my customers, that I tell to my suppliers and my wife, you know, awesome.
Your ultimate investor.
Exactly, right? And all of a sudden the conversation becomes a lot simpler.
It does, but it's you know, the challenge is our company. The challenge is that our leadership team generally know all of the right topics, all the right messages. They're involved in building strategy. They're involved in executing on that strategy. The translation of that to other people is a highly complex thing. Yeah. So we have 9 strategic imperatives in our strategic plan, and one of them is called that we have to get way better at is cascading operational leadership, because we see that there is a divide between what the leadership team is saying and the other teams are hearing.
Right.
The telephone.
Yeah.
I call it this chasm that we constantly can't get across, because we don't do necessarily a great job of translating all of these great things that we're doing and to extremely busy people during the pandemic, to try to get them to understand this the same way that we do, because it's kind of like a governance, which is that, you know, the old sort of governance rule is that your board spends maybe 200 hours a year as a director or chair on the company, but you'll spend 2,200 hours a year.
Right.
So we know it tends to be less.
Yeah.
Going on, and Catherine does, right? And the same thing I think happens in leadership teams. We're all on leadership, strategy development, all those things all day long. But there's people that are grinding out things, whether it's widgets or services. Don't have time to pay attention to you and all your fluffy stuff that you want to talk about, right? And so bridging that gap, getting it across that chasm, is tough work. And it's definitely very, very tough, especially the bigger you get. How do you manage that?
Is that a thing, that chasm? And I totally understand. I've seen it as well. But is it just a going out, or is it also a coming back? Yeah.
Yeah, I was having a conversation with my youngest today, who's she's working a summer job out the ice field, and shouldn't say that out loud, but I'll do anyway. But the comment came back. I won't get into the details. The comment came back. The higher ups won't listen to us.
Right.
So she's 19. She's running a tour. The higher ups won't listen to us. So I'm the higher up.
Yeah. Right.
And I'm not listening to it apparently, and it happens. So it's exactly that. How do you actually listen to what's going on, right? And the things like the undercover boss or whatever they call it are really good ideas.
I always love the analogy of the body for a team or culture, right? Because to me, a healthy body is attractive, right? It's resilient. It's fun to be around. It's easy to manage. You know, all of these things that you think about. Now, it's not easy to get there, just like that healthy body. But also, to me, it's that the circulation, right? You've got the heart of the organization, the core of the organization, mission, vision, values, goals. And there's got to be a communication thing. If the communication isn't getting out to the fingertips and the fingertips getting back, there's a disconnect, right? And
they fall off.
Yeah, they fall off. Exactly. That's where I was going to go with that. So, but it is, like you said, I mean, the bigger the company, you guys are 170 plus, right? You know, the harder it is. I mean, in a 3-person people, even remotely, you can jump on a Zoom or a text chat and you got everybody understanding everything right away. But the larger you get, the harder that chasm is to,
It is, and I think what it just means is, for most companies, is that you actually have to reserve way more time than you would normally to facilitate that, right? And so for me, I do a lot of time, try to spend a lot of time with my N-1s and my N-2s to kind of go over the leadership team's head and just kind of spend time with the people that are actually doing the work, so that you get rid of the higher up stuff. And it's hard. Like, a couple of years ago, I was foolish enough to say I'm going to make sure that I spend X amount of time with every single person in the company, 2 times a year.
Right.
And after it lasted for a while, but it's hard.
It's exhausting, but important.
Yeah.
And you know, the other thing that people often do early in their career, they might spend too much time like really trying to understand what the people who work for them are doing, to the point of possible micromanagement, instead of looking at the fundamentals of what the business does. So I'll just use myself as a bad example. You know, I worked as a senior manager in an aquarium. I probably spent too much time like looking at curriculum we were developing and not enough time understanding like the fundamentals of fish. And so it is important to like really, you know, dive into the foundational principles and know the competition and have enough time in your calendar as a leader to look at those bigger things and those longer term things.
I want to keep moving towards some questions that might come in from the audience, but you touched on something that I think is so important, and I'd love, again, our audience is generally newer companies.
Yeah.
How do we avoid what I would call founderitis, right? So you've got a young startup, they're leading their team, and it's starting to expand, right? And how can we help them to figure out their role and where it fits inside of the organization, especially as it goes from, you know, 1 to 3 to 12 to 100 to more, where they can fit versus and how much they need to know about what's going on at the lower levels compared to what they need to keep focused on. Is there a way to define that?
Well, I would just say that not all founders are awesome CEOs. Like being a founder is very specific. It's often a passion thing, but maybe those people have no desire or skills as a CEO. So to know that and say, I want to stay as the chief creative officer or the chief technical officer or the chairman of the board or chairwoman of the board, and not just assume that the founder is the obvious CEO. I would say that first and foremost. Yeah.
But then there's still going to be a releasing, a delegation that needs to go on, right? There's no possible way. Our company is bottlenecked by us as the leader, right? And whether we are CTO or the CEO or chairman or whatever it is, sales guy, we ultimately have to start letting go because we're either hiring people that are going to start doing that. So how do where's the mind shift and what does it look like to start moving your mind into giving it away and trusting that it's getting done versus doing it all yourself or trying to stick your fingers in everything?
Perennial challenge.
Yeah, I know. That's why I asked it. I think a big posture.
I think the number one leader's job is to replace stuff and constantly at every level. So
that built-in obsolescence again.
It does.
Yeah.
You
That's going to create some insecurity though. Like, oh, what if I can't do it anymore?
Sure, it does. And I think, having self-awareness, being grown up, helps a lot. Egos, you'll make way more money without an ego than you will, if that's your goal, than somebody who's got a strong ego, because you'll just kill yourself. Right? You really will. You'll hurt someone in that process. So I think it's got to get some joy out of building a team, knowing that you can walk away from what it is you do. Take that 6-week holiday. To me, that's been always
your
been
goal,
the ultimate
leadership goal.
If I can go away for 6 weeks, I'm the one checking email and nobody else is, and they're not sending me emails, then I've done well. Right? And so I think our role is, we see this a lot too, is to bring, especially in engineering or technical roles, to bring people up there trained as technical people. We don't train them. So the high IQ, maybe not high EQ. So that self-awareness is something that needs to be acquired and can be acquired. I think it comes through coaching. And everybody on my team has got a coach. And
internally?
External person. External coach. Yeah. Because they bring perspective to the table that we can't see, and which is just great. And this year, actually the last year for us here, and bit for us, has been just one coach that's working with the whole team to look at competencies, blind spots, all those kinds of things, right? And that helps you sort of develop. You need to be grown up enough to be able to take it. When your coach says to you, you're showing up like an ass right now, and we need to, let's talk about that, right?
That's good feedback.
It really is.
It's valuable feedback, right?
It's just kind of, you have to be able to place yourself, take criticism, and let that go back and forth, because you're all just really trying to, and I think that's key. It's just what's the purpose of the company? Like, what's your mission? What are you trying to achieve? And if you can't achieve that with the people that you've got, or as a founder, then move to something you like to do. Right.
Yeah.
Well, maybe in the past we used to overvalue, leadership meant face time. It meant like almost interfering with what your team was doing and being super hands-on. Whereas, Nasim said he values the time, for example, for his vacation, but also I imagine you value time to read and to have conversations with peers around the world. And so if we can kind of shift the values of leadership to those things, and then you become like, okay, my job is trafficking information. Like my role is to bring like really interesting examples to the experts on the team for them to work with that information in whatever way they can.
Yeah, for sure. And you have to be inclined that way, and you definitely need to enjoy that. It really comes down to do what you love to do. And so I'm taking, I haven't always been big this way, but I'm always been big last 4 years, maybe 5 years at the most, is your own personal purpose has to align with your role in the company. And if you can't get that alignment, then you're doing stuff you don't like. Right. And like, who wants to do that? So stop doing things you don't like. And that's actually, it's a great conversation. I won't use his name. There's a particular engineer that I worked with many years ago, and I call that a conversation, after his last name. Let's call him Book, Mr. Book. The Mr. Book conversation is, you're a fantastic engineer, but you suck at being a business person. So let's get you doing what you love to do. Right. And see if they get through that conversation. Right. And it's about slotting people into what it is they want to be.
Man, I can keep going with this. This is so good. I mean, even the authenticity and vulnerability that needs to come with that, right? On both sides of the party, right? You're not attacking by saying that. In fact, you're demonstrating love by going, okay, I think you're fantastic at what you do, but you really need to recognize that this is not you, right? Yet. And maybe we can get you there if you want to be there. Like, again, with aligning vision and passions and talents and biases and views with the role and what they need to do, right? But so it's tough on both sides, because that person's got to be willing to hear it and then go, okay, sounds good.
That sort of cloistering of not wanting to have a conversation with each other is pretty dangerous place to be anywhere. It just leads to dissatisfaction. It actually leads to disease, I think, in people using your body analogy.
Right.
You're not doing what you like to do.
Yeah.
You're just going to become unwell.
That, and then also the other side is you've got somebody who isn't doing the right thing, even from the head's perspective on the body. Is that a good choice to have that in the body? Like, if this person really doesn't like it and they're messing up the rest of the people and they're creating an infectious growth inside of the body, you really got to consider, I don't care how talented they are, it might not be the right choice for the body.
Totally. And my number one self-complaint is thinking about this earlier, is no, the old adage is hire slowly, fire quickly. And my biggest mistake has been to actually have people that are in the team or in another team that are simply just, they don't like being there. And you're not dealing with it. It doesn't have to be fired. It could be, how can we coach you out of that spot? That's number one. But I fired too slowly.
Right. I think we all do.
And it, because it feels bad, and you don't want to upset them, but you know, that can actually make a difference in that person's life.
It's so funny. I actually termed it now releasing. Right? Because if you think of this person is stuck in this environment, and if you can actually release them from it, again, spending time as a recruiter, I've seen people that are superheroes move to another team and fail, or somebody who's really floundering in one team and move them to another team and they're just become superheroes, right? And so you've really got to be able to understand the person. Yeah, I can see the HR guy over there nodding his head like crazy. Of course.
Well, the other part of that too is the toxicity on this, right? Which is, I think, is also a big challenge. You know, I think eventually what people do is if people on the team will recognize that somebody is toxic in the team, and if you as a leader don't do something about that, now you're the problem.
Right.
Absolutely.
Or the company is the problem, and this is just the way it is.
Right, and so this is why engagement goes down.
Yeah.
You know, there's a whole bunch of reasons why engagement goes down, but that's one of the reasons why engagement goes down. You can't actually have high engagement and high client experience if they don't reach you.
Right.
You have both of those at the same time, and so that toxicity that happens. You know, I had one person on my team a number of years ago that I think was not quite psychotic, but pretty close.
Yeah, that sounds interesting.
It wasn't you before you changed.
No, it wasn't me.
Okay.
And the signs, it's just one of the people that I should have fired a long time ago, but, you know, waiting too long. But the signs were all there.
Oh, yeah.
Right from the very beginning.
And they can be very open. I mean, nowadays we can discover the toxicity in real time on social media. Like it's not hidden anymore.
So
it's hard for toxic people to like contain that toxicity, and so double obligation, I would say, to fire quickly and have, because it can infect your customers, it can infect your shareholders. Like, it doesn't just stay within the team anymore, that toxicity. It burbles into the world.
Oh, it does. And when it explodes out of it, I mean, the conversation's going on, it's all over the world today. Obviously, when you've got, New York's governor, for example, is refusing to resign.
Yeah.
After he's
Not going to last very much longer. I got him on an alert.
But that's a serious issue in the organization. Leadership is broken.
Amazing. Colin, do you have any questions? Anything that we can throw there? I mean, I could keep going on this pretty good, so. You're gonna have to unmute yourself though if you're gonna ask for anything. Yeah, I can't see them if you're asking out there. I can see that. I can barely see it from here. It's a long ways away now. Anybody want to ask a question live? I would say go ahead and unmute yourself and do so if you can. I think Colin might have the controls.
I see something pop
what
up
does
on
it
your
say?
screen.
I can't read that far. Please, something. Okay, Colin, I'm going to leave that with you. Somebody, please write stuff in the chat so Colin can be able to ask it or turn you on to ask it. In the meantime, I'm going to keep going on that a little bit because there's, you mentioned obviously hire slow, fire fast, which I wholeheartedly agree in, and I do that. So, and then of course with social media, there's this volatility that can really happen if you don't handle that well, which to me only says be careful who you let into your house.
100%.
Right? So hire slow, fire fast. So what kind of things do you do? Okay, I know most entrepreneurs, they're going to hire their brother-in-law because he's out of work, right? You know, he's a developer, he's done a little bit of work, we're going to hire him, and it's just, I know, yeah. Well, yeah, you learned the lesson. I have too. But right, don't hire out of convenience. But the thing is like the first question, don't hire family. The other question is, okay, so why is he out of work? You might want to ask that question first before you bring him on your team. Okay. But if that's the case, what kind of lessons have you learned and really even help those founders out there to say, be careful in how you hire, and here's a few things that you should really, really do every time to make sure you get the right people.
You should Google them. That's a really good idea.
That's a great idea.
Just right out of the box. You know, you LinkedIn them, you Google them, you find there's people that you know that are in your network, hopefully that you know, you should go beyond the resume kind of stuff, right? It'd be crazy not to, right, in that way. And then the rest of it, I think, is really around coming down to, like, anybody coming on for our senior leadership team is HR goes through a process. You know, there's a values fit. You know, there's all those. There's the testing process that we go through. There's the right interview questions. There's team interviews. Like everybody on my team gets interviewed by everybody on the team. And you got to go through that process of and then what does your head say? What does your heart say? What does your gut say in terms of that hire? I guess the last thing I'll say too is that you might actually have the best example, somebody that can do that job, but what's the chemistry with the team?
Yes.
Going to be like, because you have certain subtleties that need to be adjusted. Because it's not just, we talk about diversity of team, right? It's got to fit. You don't want everybody doing and saying the same thing. That's group thing. Right. You want to have a few fireworks.
Oh yeah.
I call it healthy tension.
Yeah. Well, I like that. That's a good one.
Enough tension in there to keep everybody on their toes. And those are, my sort of issues. You do those checks.
Yeah. I have 4 C's: character, chemistry, which is what you were talking about there. Competency, which is the least important in my mind, because you can train guys. I mean, you have to be able to do the work. Yeah. But then capacity, right? And capacity really is diverse in part-time versus full-time, and growing with the team or growing with the role, but also the capacity to really get and wrap their hands around the job that's going to be expected of them, right? So, but those 4 C's, so I measure against those when I hire. But please, Catherine, more on that. Yeah. How do you make sure you get the right people?
Well, for both brilliant points, gentlemen. I would also say there's a full garbage in, garbage out. So James and I spend a lot of time on the job description, really making sure that we've very clearly articulated the bigger things that these people are going to be accountable for, and then measuring them during the interview process against those big things, big chunks, and then getting them to say in their own words, like how they would tackle certain kinds of things. So we do a lot of scenario stuff in our job interviews, and I found that really helpful, just listening to people's choice of words, how respectful they seem of their problems and problem solving and colleagues and all of that. Are they present and showing up in all of the ways that you will need them to be? And then maybe looking for not just fit with the team, but fit with the specific role. So, for example, you wouldn't want a curt and abrupt person in customer service, whereas maybe it wouldn't matter quite so much in engineering. So just really thinking about who they're interfacing with, and is that going to be a fit? I mean, ultimately, in a dream scenario would be to have those customers also interview that person, and maybe that's only a matter of time.
Well, I was going to ask about that because, I mean, in a technical role, I love the idea of auditioning, right? And that's how I talk to a lot of my entrepreneurs is, what can you do to get them to act out the role in a day-to-day? So, like even for a technical, we were talking about this years ago, one of my customers, my clients, I was working with them and we are trying to figure out good tech support. Like, okay, great. So we're going to give you a phone, and I'm going to get one of the other guys to have a broken down computer. You're going to work with them. And you play the audition, right? I mean, that's how we get Brad Pitt in a good role. You know, Brad Pitt, you're great, not for this role. Right? But I mean, obviously in a technical role, you can do that. And you're kind of talking a little bit about it, how they interface or scenario-based thinking. How do you, is that something you consider, or is that, how do you do that?
It's challenging for sure, but I think we have better tools than ever to present scenarios through and with. And then you can also use examples from the news. So you could talk about the Olympics and how did they perceive Simone Biles' decision and information, and just like hear them talk through things in a credible way. There's no right answer, but it's just like thinking about how they articulate the world, their observations. I really respond to that.
Great point.
I like that. I love that idea because I think it's like I'm a talker too, so I like to talk about all kinds of things. I can jump into a situation anywhere, and as long as it's English, I can carry on, and a little bit of German maybe. I can carry on the conversation. But I was just thinking about the technical people side, because sometimes in business you just need 10 of those. I need 10 Python programmers. I need 10 engineers that are mechanical engineering. I just need 10 engineers that grind out stuff. But yet there's one in there or 3 in there that are just, they're just not nice people. Right. And I think you kind of have to bite your tongue sometimes, which I think is a failure in terms of hiring the person that's not a nice person, because they'll just hurt the rest of the team. And I think you sometimes just need to go with just 7 if the 3 are not nice people.
Outsource the rest.
Or just hang on, or maybe take less business because you can.
7 people times 30% or divided by 30%. You know?
Yeah, it's just going to hurt for a while. Maybe. But would you rather have somebody that gets like the toxic part of it? You just need talent, and I just need talent. Solution for hiring people is a dangerous place.
I heard it said that a needed role with the wrong person a needed role without a person in the seat is painful, but it's nowhere near as painful as a role with the person in it, and you don't have the capacity to hire more, and it's the wrong person, right?
Yeah, you're going to get harassment issues. You're going to have the HR team is going to be overloaded with solving problems as well as managers. You'll create way more volume of work by hiring. We use the A word, and I won't say it out loud, but we just don't hire them, and we try to figure out what that's like. And for us, there's a period of time that we want to see how well they work. Right. If they don't work out, then it's
Right. Colin, anything out there? No? Nice. You guys are acing it. Like this is just
That's one way of looking at it.
No matter everybody fall asleep. The mic hasn't been on the entire time. So yeah, maybe you got any questions for Catherine? I mean,
maybe. One of so one of sort of capture a bit of what we were going to talk about. So in building Innovate Edmonton, we ran parallel paths. So the city went through a program of let's find a board chair. That's the starting point. And then it was my task for the city to go and find directors. the other 7 directors. While that was going on, we started CEO, so we had a parallel path. And so that whole process of doing it on the fly, like we were trying to meet, you know, an obligation, and could have got it wrong pretty quickly. I don't think we did. Definitely not.
Yeah.
He doesn't think.
How long you been in the role then?
Not even a year. Yeah. Never right? But then, so then you go about and pick your own team, right? Your own team. And I think that so one of the cautions there is that a big part of what we're trying to do at Innovate Edmonton is you don't need 2 CEOs.
Right.
We're the governance layer. I hired a CEO that's confident, very confident, and, you know, deliver on your skill set with the organization. So I think that there are 2 parts to this. One is teaching the board how to stay out of the and knowing that there's an open channel to go back and forth in terms of collaboration. You've got some questions or ideas about, you know, what do you think of this?
Yeah.
You know, just running it up with flagpole kind of stuff for a bit, you know, for the ultimate decision. Getting that right balance between governance and management is really important.
Yeah.
Because I don't want to be in Catherine's kitchen all day.
Right.
And then letting Catherine go and just go build her team. And we've had how many questions about the building of your team? Maybe 1
or 2. Yeah.
Yeah. And it's just what do you think?
Yeah.
Kind of stuff. Not what
Yeah.
should I do? No.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I'm not going to tell you what to do, right? And so that I think, especially with strong governance organizations, getting those layers right, and then with Catherine, stitching all that together, right, in terms of that, getting that right chemistry, because you start with one person, you're now building chemistry. The next person altering, and it's altering it again, and altering it
Every
again.
time, right?
But I'm interested in your sort of experience in pulling these fine people who are on the other side there pulling that together and sort of guessing on chemistry to certain extent, right?
Yeah. Well, I mean, first and foremost, working with the board, like board members want to feel valued and they want to feel useful, much like team members, right? And so, you know, kind of respecting that line between governance and management while still keeping the board actively engaged can be a challenge, right? So, and you know, Nasim's done a very good job at like articulating what governance even means, because not all board members come with the same experience. And so just setting the table for that is key. And then there's chemistry within that group and that dynamic. And then there's the chemistry within the team. But in a high functioning organization, it should be fairly similar chemistry, right? Like it should be joyful and engaged and innovative and all of those things. So even within the different roles of shareholder, board, customers, and team, you're wanting to cultivate that same vibe somehow, but you're doing it differently with the different layers. And I think it's very true. Like the first person that I hired who's behind the camera was Catherine Keel and her company on you know, the communication side of things. And then you know, that was one kind of chemistry, like working with a supplier really, and then building out the first few team members, and also the order in which you hire that team, I think is really important. So for me, like hiring the director of finance, because we were closing a, you know, multi-year, multi-million-dollar funding agreement, was absolutely critical. I needed the skill set, but also that partner in arms, like a right-hand person to really work with who had totally different expertise, but was really willing to learn the nonprofit part and the innovation part and all of that. And then it just kind of cascaded from there. We brought in James and ultimately Heather and others, and just really, I think, have begun to build a very high functioning, very engaged and very passionate team. Like the first thing that everyone has said is that they're a proud Edmontonian. And that's like such a great way to come to the table for an innovation authority for the city, to be proud of the city and want to contribute to that.
You know, it's fascinating what I'm hearing. Again, coming from, I'm kind of trying to sit in the shoes of the entrepreneur a little bit more. And so, and then of course some of the background and knowledge that I have anyway, and hearing what you're all saying. But it's surprising. I hope that the audience is hearing it too, how important culture really is. It's such a soft word in so many ways, and yet it's so vital to the development of a team. You guys are a startup, right? I mean, you happen to come at it from a different angle. You're coming at it from the board, establishing and creating a board, and then hiring the CEO and building it out. And often, you know, a company might start with the CEO, but then they're going to need a board, whether it's a group of investors or an advisory board or a governance board or a fiscal board, whatever those look like, and a team and doing it. But at every stage, in all the ways, culture is still the part that has to be the most maintained, not just, holy crap, let's fill a bunch of seats and, you know, start making stuff and get a product out. You know, it's like, if you don't have the culture to do so, you're going to run headlong into a wall every time, right? Yeah. Would you say that those are?
So agree with that.
Yeah, for sure. And every company kind of starts differently, I think, in terms of where it is. You know, often it's really done by the founders or the money or something like that, or the idea. But starting points are all can be all different, but fundamentally the outcome at the end of the day is you've got this material, this glue between all the people that kind of we're all embedded in that same sort of glue, the culture, and it evolves too.
Yeah.
Each change in chemistry of people that you add to the culture is going to.
That's really important. Right. I love that.
It is. We hired a new managing director for one of our companies about a year ago. Added that person and to the team, and they kind of came at problem solving and working with the team, you know, in a methodical, you know, listening sort of way. They came at it listened for 3 months before they actually started doing anything. But the ideas that are coming out now are massively adding culture to the team, because they're doing the I noticed, you know, conversation. And what I see as an outsider, a relatively new company, saying, here's how I think we can do things. And that person's bringing multiple different sets of skills and capabilities and ideas to the team, which is now allowing the culture to actually form. Before it probably wasn't formed as it could. So each of those ads that comes along as you add people to the organization, the idea should be that it gets better.
Right. It's an incremental improvement. If you because you're going to change the culture every single time. It can either go down or it can go up.
Right. And sometimes you actually, there's people that no longer fit on the team. And it's not that they're toxic or you know, whatever the case may be. They just the business is changing and or the business is bigger than them now in terms of the capacity capabilities. Your capacity, and so things need to change. Eventually, what happens is CEOs go too. And you're going to scale from 10 million to 20 million. Keep the same CEO. Going from 20 million to 100.
Big difference, yeah. No, that's great. Well, we've got about 5 minutes left. Colin, any words out there yet? Anything we want to ask? Otherwise, we'll just kind of do a quick wrap up. No, okay. Colin, you're an invaluable guy, and I'd like to recognize that right now we've got 2 Catherines and 2 Collins, and there might be more out there. I don't know that. But any other Nasims? That's what we need. We need more Nasims.
I know one other Nasim.
Do you?
Yep.
Pretty good. Any final words on HR? Or, I mean, we didn't really touch a lot on HR. We talked a little bit about recruitment but team building, I think, is where we really got off on and where we really built on. Any final words? And
I mean, I would, with James' blessing, also just like to offer James as a resource to the community, because as we move out of our own team building, which will ultimately happen because we're kind of capped as an organization, we want to extend this expertise into the community. And I imagine James having office hours for startups and the like, and just making sure that you all know that we're your community resource when it comes to team building.
Very cool.
Yeah, and I would sort of tack on to that too. It's just Catherine and I started out the conversation earlier on. It seems like only a few minutes ago, an hour and a half now. Is that sort of coming? I don't know if we're out of COVID or not. The sort of post-pandemic. How do you get people to get together and see real people again? Is really important in terms of spending social time with each other. Breaking bread, like it's pretty old fashioned in terms of like, but it's pretty hard to be mad at somebody after you just spend a 2-hour dinner with them. You'd still be mad at them.
Yeah.
But you get a nice glass of wine, a little bit of pasta, and everything is actually pretty good. You build relationships around it. And I think getting people face to face and especially as this next little period of time that we go through, finding ways to get real people talking to real people again.
I think that's great.
Got to do more of it.
Yeah, I'm looking forward to. I mean, I have teams kind of internationally. I've got a group in Chennai, in India, and another group in Tel Aviv, and I've got some stuff going on in Africa. And these are, I mean, admittedly, I've never been outside of, I've been to Honduras. That's as far as I've gone distance-wise. And so I would love to go and start to see these teams again, other than just through Zoom, where we can connect and go and have some amazing Indian food and some incredible, go to Israel. And these are things that are dreams for me. So I look forward to kind of that opening up again. Where
It's a more fun world if you can try.
Yeah, absolutely. Well, I think we are good. Thank you.
Yeah.
Thanks for coming. And we're going to do this again in a couple of weeks. Colin, who's next? I can't remember who's next time. You have it? Sorry, I'm putting poor Colin on the spot there.